Welcome to the Unleash Your Power podcast. I'm your host, Anastasia Jones, creativity mentor, author, and limiting belief gladiator. My purpose is to help you transcend fear, take bold, aligned action, and co-create the life and business of your wildest dreams. The world needs your art now more than ever. And if you're ready to embody the creative force within you, then you're in the right place. Now is the time to make your mark. Now is the time to unleash your power. Hi, Christina. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Hello, Anastasia. I'm so glad to be here. I'm truly so honored that you wanted to have me on. So excited. Of course.
You are such for everybody that doesn't know this, we are friends. We go back a few years.
Yes.
And I say a few, but wow, more than that.
I know. It must be at least a decade.
At least a decade. And you have just taught me so much just by example and how you fell in love with your craft and how you made it your life's mission to help inspire others who are pursuing music and also having this conversation around OCD. You've taught me so much about what it really means, and you have really helped me understand what society kind of defines it as versus what it actually is, and ways that you equip people to navigate it in their lives and to overcome it. So this conversation needs to be had. I have not heard this conversation being had anywhere else. So I'm happy that you are here for us today.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to talk about it, and to, be able to share, because it truly is, it's the way that I got help and the way that I first understood what was happening to me, because other people shared their stories and provided that education through their experience. So, I'm just so appreciative for the space to do it.
Let's dive in. Let's do the thing.
Okay.
I want to start with your passion for music. Your passion for music. And I'm going to learn so many things about you during this episode. I can already feel it. I'm so happy. Tell me about your craft, how you first found music as a creative outlet, and your singing. Tell me about that journey.
Sure. Well, I have to say, I was a really shy kid. I wasn't like the theater kid. I always wanted to be, but I was really shy. And I didn't do a ton of music in school until later on. But my family, growing up, my family had and still has a band. And so I kind of, music was always around. It was always part of our family culture. And I started singing on stage with the band probably when I was maybe 13. And I would just do a few songs here and there. But I started taking voice lessons with my piano teacher. I had taken piano lessons. And I just kind of got set on this path of classical music and classical singing, which was really out of left field, because the family band that I'm referring to is a country band, which is very unusual because I grew up in Connecticut. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, so that kind of just set me on this trajectory of wanting to keep studying, and I just was hell-bent on going to music school. I was like, this is going to be the thing for me. There wasn't really a ton that I was passionate about other than music. I loved writing, but, I was just like an average student, and music was kind of the thing that excited me.
How did your family feel about your decision to go to music school?
Ooh, well, it was, it's funny because I look back and I'm like, I'm so, like sympathetic to what they must have been thinking and feeling, because I wasn't like the theater kid in all the shows, and I didn't have this itch to perform yet. So I think for them, it was like, it's is this really the best move for her? Like, where is this coming from a little bit? But I know my dad really wanted me to kind of have a more well-rounded education and, take a, less expensive path basically than going to conservatory. But ultimately, I think I had enough of a blessing to make the move and do it. And, they were very supportive of music in general, because it was so part of the family. But yeah, so it was a very big risk for a 17-year-old to make.
Yes. And you're from Connecticut, so you moved to Boston.
Yes, to Boston, which coming from my very Italian, very small insular family, that was like, it might as well have been LA. It was a big move, even though it's so close. And nobody in my family, in my kind of like immediate family circle, had really gone away like that.
Okay.
So it was kind of felt like a big deal at the time, but it was an amazing experience. I think there are definitely things about it that I would love to change or that I didn't love. But in general, being at music school was like being at summer camp.
Wow.
It was just, especially in the beginning, it was like, is this real life? Like, all of these people are speaking my language. Everybody's creative and interesting and weird and intelligent. And it was a dream in a lot of ways, mostly because of the people that I met.
Do you feel that there was ever a moment during music school where you had to decide, I'm going to continue moving forward with this or pivot? Did you ever come to that kind of crossroads with your art?
So many times, to be honest. So many times during school, after school. It's such a heightened time, those 4 years. And there was so much going on around me, so many amazing things musically that I was like, maybe this classical thing is not for me. Maybe I should try to switch departments. Maybe I should try to switch schools and be at a school that's a little more contemporary. Or, there were just so many constant questions about pivoting, and a lot of energy spent on like, is this right? Is this right? But looking back, I think even though where I was then is so different from where I am now, like, it was all a very important part of the journey, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Do you think that were there any teachers, any mentors, any friends that in those moments where you've, had to decide, like, I'm going to continue on with my craft, continue mastering my craft, or pivot, were there any voices in your life during those moments that have helped you stay steadfast and move forward and help you kind of reignite that confidence and that creativity in your path?
Yeah. I mean, I think there were many. There isn't one person that's jumping out or coming to mind. I was fortunate to have a lot of encouragement. I loved my teacher, my voice teacher, my studio teacher when I was at NEC. We had a great relationship, and honestly, just friends, because you're all going through it together and you're all supporting each other and believing in each other. And, it wasn't this really cutthroat, competitive thing that I think people might imagine it to be, at least not my friendship circle. It's not that there's none of that going on, but, we all came to really, have each other's back. And, so yeah, I did have a lot of, help in navigating those things.
Oh, that makes me so happy. And it really just speaks to how beautiful it is to cultivate relationships that inspire you to continue creating and help you navigate the unknown. And I see what you do for the children that you work with. And you work with babies too, small kids to teenagers, like you're working with kids. And helping them develop their voice and their craft. And in turn, that is building their confidence. And it's just, I ask you that question, are there voices in your life during those times that kind of helped you stay the path and move forward? Because you are that voice for so many people now. Wow. And you really have, I've seen it. I've seen the smiles on these kids' faces after they perform and are so proud of themselves and their parents and their families. And it's just a beautiful thing how you're giving that back now.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you. I mean, it's very surreal when you put it that way. It's like I never imagined myself as a teacher, but it's definitely what gives me the most joy. I mean, I've learned along my journey, I love to sing. I do enjoy performing, but that's not really where I get my joy. So it's really just, it's all about these kids now, and I love it. It's great to not like have that focus be entirely on yourself and your career and where you're going and what your voice and what you're doing, and to just, kind of put that energy into all of these little young singers and musicians. And yeah, I'm so grateful.
Oh, so beautiful, Christina. Oh, well, thank you so much for telling just us about your craft and your art and a little bit more about your journey. Part of your creative journey has been really leaning into the topic of OCD, and you have taught me so much about what OCD actually is. And I have to be honest, up until just a few years ago, I thought that OCD was all about organizing, being just really organized. I thought it was about trying to look put together all the time. I thought it was about just aesthetics more so. And I would also hear about it talked about as if it was a badge of honor in a way. And you have really taught me about what it actually means, how serious it actually is, and how many people are struggling with it and may not even know that there's a name for it and that there's support and help. So I would love to talk about how you, if you're open to sharing, discovered that you navigated OCD before you even knew what it was.
Yeah.
And how it's influenced your craft.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because looking back, I can see that the seeds of OCD were there when I was young or there at different parts of my life. And I would say I've always been an anxious person, but my first real kind of OCD explosion, like onset of symptoms, was about 6 years ago. And I kind of look at my life like before and after that point because it was such a significant shift. Wow. And when I started experiencing this first flare up, I remember feeling like something is very wrong. Something is different in my brain. And it took a lot, what felt like an eternity to get to the bottom of it. But to be honest, in the grand scheme of most people's journey with OCD, it was quite short because I believe, I have to check this, the average amount of time that it takes a person to receive an OCD diagnosis is 14 years.
Wow.
Which is absolutely wild and like unacceptable, really. But just because there is so much misconception and misinformation, and it's, it can be really confusing, and it is something that people suffer with in silence a lot because often the obsessions and the intrusive thoughts can be so distressing and taboo to talk about that people really just harbor it, and that can go on for many, many years.
Can you share with us? I'm so sorry. Can you share with us what OCD is? Maybe that's a good place to start, just for somebody first listening and they maybe have no idea.
Absolutely.
what we're referring to.
Yeah. So obsessive compulsive disorder is a mental health disorder that is characterized by obsessive thoughts, essentially thoughts, urges, images that are unwanted and intrusive. And that's kind of the obsession piece. And the range of obsession varies a great deal. There are so many different themes of OCD. I would say kind of the most known one out there is contamination OCD. And then the compulsions are the behaviors, the safety behaviors, if you will, that the person will engage in to try to make these distressing thoughts go away and to try to, kind of get to the bottom of them, stop them, whatever the theme may be. And it's just a cycle that can repeat over and over and over and over again. So, regardless of the theme and the type and the way that the OCD presents for the person, that cycle of the obsessions and then the compulsions to try to alleviate the anxiety and distress is common amongst, all of it.
And would you say that what makes this different from having anxious thoughts is that it hinders your life in some way?
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up because everyone deals with intrusive thoughts. We all get them, right? These random, unwanted, weird, maybe disturbing thoughts that come in and pass through for most people. And, you move on from them. You don't flag them as significant or something that's, part of your character, right? But for a brain with OCD, it gets stuck and it is flagged as something significant and something that needs to be figured out and something that, could happen. It's just so many what ifs, right?
Yeah.
Like to give an example, if I had harm OCD, perhaps an intrusive thought comes to me about causing harm or violence against a loved one, right? And whereas somebody might go, oh, yeah, that was weird, and move on, an OCD brain that latches onto that is going to go, maybe I could do something like this. Maybe I'm a monster. Maybe I need to stay away from this person. And, and those compulsions could be truly avoiding that person, keeping yourself away from objects that could harm them, various things. But basically it's like those thoughts stick and the brain just responds to them differently, basically. It's like a misfire.
And that would hinder your relationships with that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can be, so debilitating, especially, of course, across different themes, the way it looks may be different. Like for those who have physical compulsions, like say with contamination OCD, it could be the hand washing. It could be, just spending so much time and energy of your life trying to get rid of germs so that you don't harm your family, whatever that the fears may be around. And it can be to the point where people can't leave their homes, can't get out of bed. It can be incredibly severe. So yeah, it can absolutely, I think that difference of where it becomes pathological is like, is it really affecting your quality of life?
Right.
And, that makes that difference.
I'm curious to know how, if we're talking about creativity and how you believe OCD can impact someone's creativity or ability to create.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the really rough things about OCD is that it will attack what you love and value most.
Okay.
So, for example, the responsibility comes in, you say you have a dad who's terrified of contaminating his daughter. It's like, okay, your child is going to be the thing that you love and value most in this world. It makes sense that OCD is going to go after that.
Wow. Okay.
Whether it be your work, your friends, your whatever it may be. So I think for creative people, it's definitely something that OCD can latch onto and make you feel, I think it's also important to say, like, generally people with OCD are operating from a pretty low sense of self-worth because it can really beat you up and beat you down. And so, it can be so hard to push past all of the mental noise and the fears and, all of the things that are coming up and create anyway.
Yeah.
And a big mantra in OCD recovery for me and for so many people is like values over fear. Because at the end of the day, it's about living to your values anyway, even if you're scared, even if you're terrified, because that's where the freedom lives. Like, there is no freedom without risk. And
God, that's beautiful.
So yeah,
say that again for us. Say that again for us.
Okay. So there is no freedom without risk. And a friend of mine in the OCD community says that, like, risk is the price of freedom. And, it's really true. And I think, I can give an example for me. When I started teaching is about the time where my OCD was really, really severe. And I had not gotten the diagnosis yet. I didn't know what I was dealing with. And it was just a really difficult time. And at that time, though, my studio was beginning to grow. This is about 5 years ago. And, I was having all these young students. And, while I wish I could have been celebrating that, what was going on behind the scenes for me mentally was like, I'm having these intrusive thoughts, some like around children, which is, it's a common theme. And so that was really, I'm dealing with that. Like, I must be a monster. I shouldn't be working with kids, etc. Really dark, really rough. And then,
because it's what you value the most.
Exactly. Like, I love these kids.
That's what it attacks. It's
exactly.
Like, yeah.
And it's important also to mention that OCD is ego dystonic, meaning these are not things that people with OCD are gonna run out and do in reality.
Yeah,
like, it's the furthest thing from, I know it sounds like I'm giving myself reassurance, but it's the furthest thing from
reality, from what you would actually do.
Right.
Yeah. No, right. I love that. I love that. Say that phrase again, or that term.
Yeah. So ego dystonic.
Ego dystonic.
Meaning it's like, it's counter to what, to the person's.
You would do.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and I was feeling like, OCD is kind of like imposter syndrome on crack. Yeah. Like, it's like, I don't deserve to be doing this. I don't know what I'm talking about. If I misspeak, it's like I'm a complete hack and I'm going to harm this child's voice. It was so many different things, and OCD was just screaming at me. And for the longest time, I just thought, well, I must not be cut out for this. Like, this is just not a good fit. If I'm going to be this anxious all the time, and, I must just not be a good teacher, and this is not for me. And I did take a break from teaching for a while.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it kind of like coincided with a move that I made. I moved to New York City for a little while. And it's sad in hindsight, because I just didn't know what I was dealing with and didn't realize that no matter what I was doing, OCD is going to show up, especially if it's something that I care about. And it doesn't actually mean that I'm a terrible teacher. Hopefully not. But, like,
definitely
all of these
not.
things.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Like, all of these things are just part of it. And when I learned the tools and how to respond and how to kind of move through that, I was able to get back to doing what I feel like I'm really meant to do and the thing that I value most, which is teaching.
What are some of those tools? If maybe there's one that you can share with us today.
Yeah. So, a big part of, of OCD recovery is just learning to sit with uncertainty, anxiety, and discomfort. So, for example, if I'm in a lesson and I feel like I have done a poor job explaining something, maybe I've said something poorly, or maybe I feel like I was not sensitive enough, or something just didn't go perfectly, let's say, right? Is to just make room for that and say, maybe I didn't do the best job, and I'm going to feel a little anxious, and I'm going to feel this discomfort. I'm not going to try to push it away. I'm not going to try to reassure myself that it didn't happen. I'm not going to try to replay it 1,000 times to go over what I did or didn't do wrong. I'm just going to accept that I don't know. Maybe I made a mistake, and that these fears, they could happen. So maybe not is another big mantra and it's such a hard thing to say, because it's easier said than done, right? Like, maybe I did hit someone with my car. Maybe I am going to poison my child. Like, nobody wants to say that. Yeah. Right. But like, honestly, that's where the freedom lies.
Wow.
Of being able to go, yep, I don't know. And I'm not going to know. I'm not going to figure it out, even though OCD really wants me to.
So it's that I hear you say that there's a level of grace and surrender that you have to have when you navigate through those moments of difficulty, uncertainty, and anxiety. And I also hear you saying acceptance, like a level of acceptance, like this is the thought.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. Of like, this is going to show up. I may not like it. It may make me feel very anxious, etc. But I'm going to sit with it. Bring it on, brain. It's like, the more, like I said, the more we try to push it away and fight it, the worse it gets. So yeah, I think also, so in OCD treatment, like the gold standard is called exposure and response prevention. And basically the way that this modality works is that it seems very counterintuitive in a way, because you're exposing yourself to the thing you're afraid of. So for example, if I, let's see, what kind of example do I want to give? I'm going to give a harm OCD example, because that was kind of what I said before. So say somebody is really, really terrified of having sharp objects around because of their violent, intrusive thoughts about harming a loved one. They may want to hide the knives. They may not want to not have knives in their home. And so you would start small and say, you know what, maybe we're going to put the knives back in the drawer, or maybe I'm going to crack the drawer open and just sit with that terrible discomfort of having that drawer cracked open. And so from there, you slowly level that up, basically. And the idea is that because you're actually leaning in and exposing yourself to the fear, the response prevention part is that the goal over time is that the anxiety decrease over time, but also your ability to tolerate it increases. So again, goal is not to make the anxiety go away. It's to learn how to live with it and tolerate it more. And the response prevention also means that you're not performing as many compulsions. So a compulsion in that case could be, checking to make sure the drawer is closed, checking to make sure your partner is okay, various mental compulsions of ruminating and seeing images of what you could do, and maybe I did this, maybe I did that. So when you're not engaging in those as much, that's the goal too, is to decrease and ultimately eliminate the compulsions.
That is so beautiful. I it was a few months ago, but I was having a conversation with a few friends, and one of them expressed that their roommate struggled with OCD and couldn't leave the house without curling her hair.
Oh.
And I know, and she would go back and curl it 4, 5, 6 times, and they would be chronically late for things. She would be late if show up at all. And what I want to intentionally communicate to everybody listening is that it's the compulsion that impacts your quality of life. It's
absolutely
that OCD has a negative impact on your quality of life. It impacts your relationships. It impacts your finance. It can impact any area of your life. But when I hear you say values over fear, your OCD can and will attack the things that you value the most, the things that you love the most. And if that's human connection, if that, whatever it is. So we were kind of talking about this earlier before the episode, before we pressed record, but I do think there's a narrative in the creativity space that we want to just hit head on, which is OCD doesn't help your creativity. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. And again, I got to give a shout out to the friend who runs our support group at OCD New Hampshire, because it is a point that he makes repeatedly, which is that there is no benefit to having OCD.
Say that again, because I want everyone to hear this, okay?
Right. There is no benefit to having OCD. It's not keeping you safe. It's not keeping you honest. It's not keeping you tidy and responsible. Like, these are all the lies that OCD tells you. And, you know, the reality of it is it can very well keep you from living your most true life to your fullest potential, your values, all of those things. So I think, you know, perhaps with many mental health conditions, people may feel that it becomes so much a part of you and your identity that you're like, who am I without it? What if I can't do this? What if I am not going to be able to create in the way that I do or whatever? But the reality of it is like, you are this beautiful human being, you know, that is capable of all of those things and more, you know, especially when this is, you know, kind of being healthfully and skillfully managed. You're going to be able to reach, you know, so many new like heights in your creativity and in your, you know, in whatever it is you're passionate about when OCD is not running your life and calling the shots. So yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think it's important to mention, you know, I have had those fears, as I think a lot of people with OCD do, of like, it's almost like the devil, you know, like it's like the kind of the crazy that you use. It's like, okay, well, I've dealt with this for so long, and like, this is kind of what it is. But it's like, you know, it sounds crazy to say it that way, because nobody would not want it to go away. But, but yeah, so I'm really glad you mentioned that. And I think, just to go back to the great example you gave of the friend who needed to perform that compulsion of curling the hair, you know, I think that's an example of something that the average well-meaning person could look at and be like, oh, like, that's innocuous enough. Like, that's just maybe a preference that she has. And, you know, what we love for people to know and understand is that, like, that's not fun for her. You know, I feel pretty confident in saying, like, it would probably be extremely distressing for her to have to leave the house without performing that safety behavior, whatever the fear may be around it. And, you know, it's, as you said, who knows the time and energy that she has to spend, you know, doing that, performing that compulsion, could be keeping her from connection, from getting places that she wants to be, from leaving her house more frequently. So I think that's actually a really, really great and interesting example of how bizarre it can be the way OCD presents sometimes. Like it can look so drastically different for
everyone,
for everybody, but the nature of the disorder and the cycle of what's happening is the same. So I'm glad that you brought that one up.
Yeah. It was definitely a moment that I hope I always remember it, because to see my friend talk about it, she didn't know what to do. She didn't know about what OCD was. She didn't know about how to support her friend, her roommate. And I would love to just talk about that, before we close, and just say, as somebody, because OCD is common, right? It's very common.
Yeah. And I believe the current statistic is like 1 in 100 adults.
That's
I can't
incredible.
remember for children, but it's about like 3% of the US population.
So there is a strong likelihood that somebody that we know and love, somebody that you know and love, is struggling with OCD and may or may not know.
Absolutely.
So as somebody that I do not struggle with OCD, and I desire to support people that do, how can we do that? Like what is a great place to start in order to learn how to best support someone you love who is navigating OCD?
That's a great question.
Some things to do and some things not to do. Maybe that will be that.
Okay. So, I guess a lot of it depends where the person is at on their journey with OCD. If they are somebody who's been, struggling for a long time and has a great deal of awareness, has been in treatment, that's a little bit different from someone who maybe doesn't really know what they're dealing with yet and is kind of in the beginning stages of the psychoeducation and getting help and this and that. So just want to acknowledge that could look very different. But I think something that's helpful is to just, I think that our desire is to always alleviate the pain and suffering and anxiety of our loved ones. But when it comes to OCD, there's a lot of enabling that can be done that can cause harm. For example, reassurance. I would often, from partners, my mom, my friend, my close friends, I would seek reassurance whenever OCD was screaming at me of like, maybe I did this thing 5 years ago, and or maybe I did this thing today that my brain is telling me is awful. Let me run this by my friends, and it seems simple enough. Oh, I'm just, venting or talking to a friend. But what I'm actually doing is a compulsion and trying to get that reassurance that I'm not a terrible person, that it wasn't that bad. But the reality of it is, it's just fueling the beast more. Like what I say now to my friends or the people who, know about this and want to kind of support is to kind of give me that exposure in the moment and say, yeah, maybe, I don't know, or just like so to good. Not give me that reassurance. But again, I say this with a disclaimer because we don't want to go around giving exposures to those who aren't ready. Like if somebody is really freshly in the beginning of their journey, hasn't done any exposures yet, doesn't have the muscles and the tools to tolerate that yet, then, you got to have that conversation. But basically giving yourself like a baseline level of education about OCD, I think it really sends a message to that loved one that you care, that you're curious, that you want to help, you want to know, you support them. And then I guess what not to do or what not to say, that can be tricky. I think, just it can feel really isolating sometimes, and it can feel really easy to be misunderstood. So I think just having an empathetic ear, like not trying to make anything necessarily relate it to this or that, and just being an ear and just validating the struggle. And even if it is confusing and hard to understand, just being open to learning and listening, I guess, is what I'd say.
I love that. And I think especially with how the media likes to talk about OCD and the things that I believed about OCD before I took time to learn, and you have been so gracious in educating me on what OCD actually is. I do now hear how much people make light of it, or maybe make talk about OCD in a way that's like jokey, trying to be funny, trying to, I think in terms of things not to do, like after you listen to this episode, you'll automatically be more conscientious of how you talk about OCD in general, is my hope. But maybe one thing not to do is, talk about it like it's a joke,
yes.
Or
for sure. And, just for people to kind of understand what's at stake is because of that kind of, humor that's used, the misconceptions, the this and that, what it does is prevent people from having clarity around what this is and what they may be experiencing. It prevents people from getting help, from really regarding it as a serious mental health condition.
Yeah.
And so, it does have this unfortunate ripple effect. So there is a lot at stake to really kind of, having that clarity around what it is and what it isn't. And I have to say, your question about, how a friend can help and respond, like, I just have to give you a shout out because your reaction, your response to learning that I had OCD could not have been more perfect, to be honest.
Right. You're actually going to make me cry.
Oh, no, but truly, I really want to say it. I mean, I'm not just saying it. It was because it was exactly what I could want and hope for. I felt really seen. I felt like you were curious. I felt like you were just, I remember when we did this, film festival, for OCD Awareness Week, you shared it on your platform. You're having me on to talk about this right now. Like, I'm just so grateful to have your support and to have had a friend to react that way, to make me feel validated, to not make me feel like there's shame. So get yourself an Anastasia. That's my advice.
I can't even talk.
Friend. Oh, I want to come in the other room and hug you.
I just love you so much. And I feel so honored that you let me in. And so when you opened up to me, I just felt so much love. And it's been so neat seeing you. I mean, you are on the executive board of OCD New Hampshire. Like, you are truly, you are helping so many people and using these painful experiences that you have gone through and turning it into this garden of hope and love and light. And just, I'm thankful that you let me into this part of your journey. It's just been, I will support you till the day I die.
This is honestly,
and you are my very first podcast guest.
I'm so just overwhelmed with like gratitude, and wow. I'm so grateful. And I also want to say, like, to those out there that are scared to share and so scared to bring somebody in, just, I want to acknowledge that sometimes people may not have the tools to understand. They may not have, perhaps the bandwidth or the desire to understand, but so many times you'll be surprised of how much support there can be on the other side, and how much support there is even beyond your family and friends. If that's not something that you're ready for, there's so much, so many resources, support groups. I acknowledge that it's incredibly difficult right now to find OCD specialists, especially, there's just such high demand post COVID, and finding an OCD specialist that's truly an OCD specialist is really hard. So, we'll definitely link to how you can reach out to me, to OCD New Hampshire, because that's kind of our whole mission, is to just help people get help and provide the resources and education that can truly save lives and make a big difference.
Oh, Christina, thank you so much for joining us today and for just sharing your story and all of these very helpful tips and insights on OCD and creativity, and reminding everyone to choose values over fear.
Absolutely.
And that's the name of the game. That's everything. That's creativity in a nutshell. That's what we talk about on this podcast. And that is just a great reminder. You've been a great reminder for everyone listening. So
yes. And even if I love you too. And I was going to just say, even if you don't struggle with OCD, I feel like we are human beings on planet Earth. We all experience fear and we all experience anxiety. So that reminder of values over fear is just, I think it can be
universal.
Exactly. And just to say that even if, yesterday was a shit show of a day, today is today, and you can make that choice to live to your values right now. And nothing else matters but that.
Thank you so much, Christina. I love you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love you. And I am just so grateful. Thank you for having me.
Of course, we will link, I will link all of Christina's contact information in the show notes, as well as some links for support groups for OCD New Hampshire. And it's an affiliate of the International OCD Foundation of everywhere, right?
Yes.
Everybody can connect with
IOCDF.org is a great resource. Yes.
So we'll link all of those in the show notes. Thank you everybody for listening. And I can't wait to have you on again soon, Christina.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Bye.
Bye. Hey friend, thanks for listening. I'm so happy you're here. If this episode helped you in any way, please take a screenshot, share it with a friend, post it to social media, and better yet, why don't you leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening from. My desire is to activate as many creatives as possible. And if you are looking for additional support on your creative journey, you can always connect with me on Instagram at AnastasiaRJD. Or visit the links in the show notes. We've got free resources to reignite your creativity and soul-centered ways that we can continue to work together. I'll see you again next week. Same time, same place.